Hello, everyone. Welcome to An Honest Look. We have our fabulous guest, John Latta, here today. He's going to share with us a lot of powerful stories. Just before we start, I want to let everyone know that to just send some healing thoughts to my co-host Rick and his family. He had a family emergency, so unfortunately he's not going to be able to come on. But we're going to be here and we're going to have this conversation with John anyway. It's going to be a lot of value anyway. So I want to welcome you to the show, John. I'm very excited to have you on. And I'm going to introduce you to our audience.
Okay.
So that they know what your background is. So John Latta is a mystic, an author, a teacher, and the former founder and CEO of a multi-million-dollar consumer products company. He shares intimate and personal stories and teaches workshops on leadership, healing, transformation, awakening, love, synchronicity, and wisdom that unite and expand human experience. And he's here to share with us his powerful story of transformation, all the things that he has endured in his life, and talk about a little bit about his book, The Synchronicity of Love, and what he's doing today with all this experience and wisdom that he brings into the world. Welcome, John.
Thank you, Fatí. I really appreciate the invitation to be here, and I'm sorry to hear about Rick. I hope everything goes well with his father.
Thank you so much. Yes, we're all sending him so much love, Rick. I know you will watch this at some point. We're all with you. We love you. So much strength your way. All right, let's dive in. So I wonder if you can just walk us a little bit through what your experience in life is, and what led you to do what you do today. What were some of the things that took you here?
Yeah, so let's see. I'm going to back up about 20 years ago, and I was living what I call a relatively charmed life at the time. I didn't have too many things go wrong in my life. And then it seemed like in a short period of time, everything that could go wrong all went wrong at the same time. My wife got cancer. It came completely out of left field. She was healthy, took good care of herself. But literally 2 weeks after diagnosis, surgery, her entire thyroid gland removed, stage 4 cancer. It was in her lymph nodes. They took a bunch of lymph nodes out too. She had to go through multiple rounds of radioactive iodine treatments, which is like chemotherapy for that type of surgery. And she began to change a lot. She went very quiet and went inward and started reading books about God and the meaning of life, and I think was reviewing her own life. And I probably wasn't the best person to support her through all that because I didn't have any experience in that area and wasn't what I would call a spiritual or religious person anyway. I was kind of one of those competitive, hardworking, argumentative, know-it-all kind of guys. And but at the same time, I had left my very secure job and started my own company. And in a short period of time, I lost all of our money and a whole bunch more. And was in debt to the tune of $650,000. I borrowed against the house. I borrowed $250,000 in credit card debt. I borrowed against everything I could. And I didn't see any way that my company was ever going to turn the corner and start making money. And so, and then about that same time, I don't know where it came from. Suddenly I had this unbelievable fear of death. I'd never confronted death before. I never thought about death before. And because I had at best a part-time Catholic upbringing for, up until I was probably 13 or 14, I just didn't really have a foundation to fall back on. Like, well, what happens when you die? And all I could conceive of was when the body dies, then I die. And that means that'll be the end forever. And for some reason, the word forever and oblivion just terrified me. So I went from happy-go-lucky, having a pretty good life, to suddenly my wife's got cancer and she's very quiet and going within. I'm running around terrified because I've lost all my money and I'm going to have to go bankrupt and start all over again. I didn't know how to do that. And 3, I was terrified of death and I didn't even know who to talk to about it. Was probably too proud to even ask anybody about it. And then in the middle of it all, my wife decides she wants a whole new life and leaves and says, you take the kids, you're the better parent, see you later, goodbye. And in the blink of an eye, I'm now a single dad with custody of my 2 kids, ages 9 and 11. And like I said, hanging by a thread financially. And every day I'm like, I'm going to probably have to go bankrupt. I'm going to have to go bankrupt. And so, like so many people that go through great transformation, my journey began with pain. I don't know why it has to be that way. And I don't think it has to be that way, but it often is that way. And so I was running around, honestly, in grief, in fear and anger, high anxiety. I was already a skinny guy who was really athletic, and I lost 15 pounds. So I was 5'11" and dropped down to about 140 or 145 pounds, just worrying my weight away. And at the same time, for months or even years, I'd been reading a story in a book I loved. And the book was called Travels by Michael Crichton. Michael Crichton, world famous author, wrote a bunch of best-selling sci-fi type novels. And, made a lot of them into TV and movies and things like that. Well, he wrote, a lot of people don't know it, a nonfiction book called Travels. And Michael went through his own sort of, you might call it midlife crisis, and came out of it determined to experience a lot of things directly that he'd only read about. And one of them was spirituality and psychic stuff, you might say. The very thing he knew nothing about, he'd only read about, I'm going to experience it directly. Well, he went to this retreat in the desert with a very eminent physician turned spiritual teacher who went by the name of Brew Joy. That was his actual name. And he had all these wonderful experiences there. And I kept reading about him over and over again, which was pretty ironic given that I was so anti-spiritual. Well, in the depths of my despair, I read that story of his experiences there, like for the 100th time. I threw the book aside, ran to the computer, wondered if the guy holding that retreat was even still alive. And there he was in the internet, alive and well. And it looked like he was teaching the exact same thing that Michael Crichton went to 20 years earlier.
Wow. I
signed up on the spot and said, if I go bankrupt, the extra couple $1,000s isn't going to matter. It's just like, yeah. And so, and I remember in his little, discussion of the workshop, it said, he called it a conference. He says, this conference can be very life renovating. And some part of me knew I needed life renovation. I needed to be remodeled, so to speak. So I went, and I didn't have a lot of crazy experiences. But the funny thing is what I would call the synchronicity, those coincidences that happen to us. Some people call them miracles. Some say serendipity. Some say coincidence. Some say synchronicity. They began the minute I signed up for the workshop. And I hadn't even gotten there yet. And I remember one story of, as the plane was landing, I'd flown to, it was the high desert in Southern California where the retreat was. The woman next to me was reading the retreat leader's book. And, which was a huge bestseller back in I think it was the late 70s or early 80s. And I looked at her and said, are you going to the same retreat that I am? She goes, yeah, I'm really nervous. Well, you look normal. I said, well, you look normal too. Okay, I guess it's going to be okay. And I counted roughly 180 people on the plane, and the only two people going were me and her. What are the chances we'd be seated side by side? She was a cute grandmother from Kalispell, Montana, a tiny little town. And so I go to the workshop. I don't have a lot of crazy spiritual experiences. I have a very different experience than Michael Crichton had, but we essentially did all the same things. But the first thing I discovered was I hadn't realized how much I kept people at a distance before. I hadn't truly been open, honest, vulnerable, and intimate with other people. And I craved it. I loved it. I'd never experienced that in my entire life. And so when I came back from that retreat, I had all the same pressures, all the same worries, everything, but they all felt just a little bit lighter. I don't know how to put it into words. Like I was still dealing with all the same problems, but they felt lighter. And so I'll pause there. Do you have any questions along the way?
Yeah, but what happened at this retreat that made such a big difference? I guess that's the first question that comes to mind. Yeah.
Well, okay. So more funny synchronicities. So, life is really funny. And I want to say sometimes life presents you something that you uniquely need to learn or embrace. And so I go there hoping to have spiritual experiences, hoping to see auras, hoping to have, all these other things that other people have had and were having there, but I didn't. But the first thing that happens is we stayed in little cabins out in the desert, and my roommate. So when my wife left, she left me for another guy, and that was really painful. But the funny thing is, I my roommate was essentially like he had played the role of the other guy in another marriage and relationship. And so I'm like, so some part of me hated that I'm sharing a cabin with a guy that also walked away with somebody else's wife. I don't know if that makes sense.
Look
And
at that
so,
synchronicity, right?
yeah, well, and there it was. And so, but then I started talking to him, and I'm listening to his story and his life. And yeah, his wife was married to somebody else, and there's a kid, and he was just saying, John, I guarantee your ex-wife is in pain. I guarantee her new boyfriend's in pain. I guarantee. And he goes, I'm in pain. My new wife is pain. Her ex-husband's in pain. And the more I started to listen to him, I think for the first time in my life, my heart started to open with compassion, which wasn't what I wanted out of the retreat, but it was what I was going to get out of the retreat. Right. And then to make it even more interesting, we would do various exercises, and we got paired up with different people.
Sorry, I mixed up something.
No worries. I still see you.
It wasn't working well where I was looking. Go ahead.
So I get paired up with a partner, and a gal named Lisa. Nice. She's about my age. She's from the Midwest. And I find out from her that she's planning, when she gets back from the retreat, to leave her husband and children. And I'm like, oh my God. So what are the chances I go to this retreat? And first, my roommate is essentially some version of, I'd call it the other guy. And my partner in various exercises was a woman who was planning to do exactly what my wife did. When she gets back, she was planning to leave her wife and children. And I just remember just being, how did I get partnered with her? But the more I started to listen to her and her story and everything, and it all made perfect sense. And so instead of having a lot of cool spiritual experiences, which did come later, but did not happen at that retreat, you might say your particular lesson, John, was compassion, and a bunch of synchronicities are going to unfold so you can learn the dang lesson about compassion. And so I think that's really what happened. I mean, there was lots and lots of different things that we did. Probably the one that stuck with me the most after that workshop, besides beginning to open my heart to compassion and maybe not be so quick to judge people. Right. The teacher liked to work a lot with dreams and thought dreams were sacred. And he had exercises. In fact, I'll share one with you right now for how to remember a dream. And because not everybody remembers their dreams. Some people do, some people don't. And so it goes, when you go to bed at night, grab a notebook and a pen or maybe a recording device, put it next to your bed. And as you're laying there relaxed and you feel yourself starting to fall asleep, imagine yourself walking up to the edge of a great cliff, and there's a huge abyss below the cliff. And you take off all your clothes so you're completely naked, turn your back to the abyss, and fall backwards off the cliff into the abyss and ask for a dream. And so I started doing that, and it took a while, 3 or 4 nights. And all of a sudden I had a little snippet of a dream. It was only like 3 seconds of a dream. And then I don't remember how much time went by, probably a few weeks went by. And pretty soon I had a full dream. I wrote it down, and then another. And then pretty soon I had like 5 dreams a night. And at some point I went, whoa, I got to turn this off. I need to sleep, There were dreams coming.
Wake up to take notes? Is that what happened?
That's what happened. I would wake up, I would write it down, partly because if I didn't write it down, I'd be laying there thinking about it, like, what was that about? Mm-hmm. And that came, ended up, and so about that same time, I joined a dream forum that the teacher had created. And anybody that has sat down and decided, I'm going to remember my dreams, I'm going to record my dreams, encounters the first big problem is, can I remember them? Because they can slip through your fingers really easily. Right. The second big problem is, if you've not worked with dreams before, they make no sense. It's like some sort of Alice in Wonderland kind of thing. And it's like, I don't see how this crazy dream images could possibly help me in any way. And so then became, the time it took for me to what I would call learn the language of dreams. And that took quite a period of time. And some very wise people in the dream forum were very helpful in that regard. And to this day, 20 years later, I still record my dreams faithfully. I still pay attention to them like crazy. And so I think everybody not everybody, but everybody that feels like they get what I would call divine guidance of one kind or another. They get it in their own way. It can be, in a little intuition. They can get it by seeing signs in nature. They can get through a feeling sense. But for me, since I'm highly visual, it mostly comes through dreams, although I got a lot of voices through my dreams too.
Wow.
And it's helped me heal all sorts of chronic I wouldn't call them, one was chronic, but some various physical ailments I've had over time. And if I had to pick the two things I got out of my 10 days in the desert, it was compassion and to pay attention to my dreams.
Wow. I love that you shared this. I love, there's a couple things that I would like to reflect on. First of all, the synchronicities that you're talking about. Immediately when you mentioned that, the person on the plane, it made me think of the book Synchrodestiny by Deepak Chopra. I don't know if you heard that. He talks about coincidences like that. I think it was on a plane too when, one of them happened. But the other thing that you're pointing to is you went there with an expectation of having this really mystical experience. And we tend as human beings to just define what that should look like, right? We project what it should look like. We have an expectation of it. And it doesn't always come in the way that we expected, right? And you walked away with spiritually, like on a different level, right? Because now you learn to have more compassion. And not only that, but what I'm hearing you say is that you were able to see things from the point of view of those that you in that moment were judging, or you had anger or, feelings about, right? So it really helped you see a different point of view that wasn't yours in that moment. And like, there's nothing more spiritual than the ability of being able to do that, see things from a different, higher perspective beyond us.
Yeah.
Right. So
I totally agree with you. Yeah.
Right. I love that you brought this up, right? I expected to go there and see auras and people talking to me, and yet all I'm seeing is my story reflected back. These characters showing up and really showing me what I couldn't see on my own.
Yeah.
And I've had many instances of that in a probably related circumstances within my divorce, where I became really good friends with someone who then we realized along the way that we're really there for each other, to show each other the other side. Yeah. Like we really reflected on that, like, oh, that's why this person has dropped into my life, right?
Yeah.
Which really, I think, supports that, the concept that everyone in your life is really bringing you a lesson, a teaching, is showing you something, right?
Yeah, in fact, I have a story I want to tell you that happened 3 years later after the retreat, and it kind of tagging on to being able to see the world through another's eyes, and how everybody can be a mirror for us. And so I went with my wife at the time to England. I think it was the summer of 2005. And we were on a tour of what they call sacred sites. So we were going to go to Stonehenge. We had a private sunrise ceremony at Stonehenge. And I lost track of all the cool places we got to go see. First day I get there. So mind you, I'm from Seattle, so I'm 8-hour time difference. So I'm really tired on the first day. And England is experiencing a once every 100-year heat wave where it literally was 100 degrees every day for the first week. And almost nothing in England has air conditioning. Almost nothing in Seattle has air conditioning either. But England was crazy. Like you walked into the Hilton Hotel in London, and the lobby was stifling because there's no air conditioning in the lobby there. Yeah. And so I'm a little cranky with the heat and the 8-hour time difference. I meet all the people we're going to be traveling with, and there's probably 25 of us from all over the world. And they were so cool, and it was fun meeting them. I loved everybody except for the tour leader. I couldn't stand her. And she was like, the way I remember her, she was 6 feet tall. She was Italian. She was loud, mouthy, blustery, cussed up a storm, and loved conspiracy theories, hated George Bush, the president, and didn't hide any of it. And so I don't know, talking about tagging on to what you're talking about, expectations. It wasn't that I really expected her to be all dressed in white, but it wasn't really what I expected on a tour leader of sacred sites in England. And oh, she was mouthy and self-centered and would hog the conversation. But at the same time, she was very clairvoyant, very intuitive, very psychic, very empathic. And so I'm in the back of the room trying to hide how much I can't stand her, but I'm just sure she knows it anyway. And I'm thinking to myself, I just don't want to let this gal ruin my trip. And so I knew loosely about a Hawaiian healing practice called Ho'oponopono. And I knew a little bit about in Western psychology about, the concept of projection, and what we see in another that we like or don't like is actually kind of a mirror for us. So I went to bed that night, which I wasn't going to sleep anyway, because there's no air conditioning in the hotel room that we're staying in. It was a small motel that second night. And on the third floor with a window about not much bigger than a postage stamp. I mean, it was so insufferably hot in there. It was ridiculous. So I'm laying on top of the covers, and I had learned from the retreat about heart centering. And if you can kind of see here, and I kind of created my own ritual in the dark, and I was very sincere about it. I tried to see her as a reflection of me. And I was like, well, I interrupt people sometimes. Yeah, I can be kind of loud and blustery.
Wow.
And I pretend I don't like conspiracy theories, but I actually do read them behind closed doors. And I sometimes would cuss out George Bush a little bit too. And so I kept looking at her, all these qualities, like, yeah, I can see that in me. And so in my mind's eye, what I did was I tried to bring her into my circle, and I kept looking at her and saying, as if she was a part of me. And I kept saying, I'm sorry. I love you. Please come home. And, so I'm not pushing her and these aspects of me away, but actually acknowledging that they are a part of the wholeness of me. So again, I wasn't sleeping. I did that for a whole hour, really sincere. I'm sorry. I love you. Please come home. And that's not exactly how Ho'oponopono works, but I kind of combined that with psychology and projections and heart centering. Right. And I just made it my own ritual. I did it for a whole hour, slept fitfully, get up the next morning. Everything changes. It's like a miracle. Like suddenly we're best buddies. We're throwing our arms around each other, laughing. Suddenly I don't hate her anymore. And I think she's funny. And I really like her. And she starts to trust me. And she starts to tell me stories about her life. And she did have a difficult childhood. And she did kind of, as a result of that, kind of come out a little bit of, I would call it a man hater. She was determined to take down the patriarchy and didn't like powerful men. But it was okay, because now I had compassion for her. And then one time on, one of the days, she pulls me aside. She goes, all the people that come on my tours are either women or gay men or conspiracy theorists, but you're none of them. She goes, this is really new for me. I mean, I love, she was so honest about it. And by the end of the trip, the last day was that private sunrise ceremony at Stonehenge. And again, I'm feeling compassion for her. And I'm realizing it's not easy to take people from all over the world with a lot of crazy logistics to go to all these crazy different places in England. And, there's young and old and people that are dealing with, people that are there from New Zealand. I mean, they're on a whole different day. Right. And plus the 100-degree heat and everything. And so I put my arm around her and I said, hey, thank you for putting this trip together. It must have taken a lot of courage. And she starts crying and saying, you have no idea how much this means to me. And so this is a lesson I continue to learn even to this day, is that it's possible to not see the other as different than you, as the enemy, as somebody who's not like you, and that you need to push away. It's actually possible to say, I could see a little bit of you in me, right, and be okay with it. And so I probably spent a lot of time, honestly, over the last 4 or 5 years doing this with Donald Trump. And right, trying to go, well, there's times I tell half truths and times that I try to manipulate people. And so I do try to walk my talk, and it's still kind of an ongoing thing, but I'm really grateful for it too. And it all started with that retreat from 20 years ago.
That's incredible, the lessons that you took from any of these experiences. And you're speaking to some really important concepts here, right? Mm-hmm. Compassion. We're not able to have that compassion. We're never going to be able to forgive, right? Yeah. And if you're not willing to take our ownership of our part, or even see it, we're going to continue to be triggered, because that's what the trigger is pointing to.
Yes.
right? The trigger wants you to see something that you can't really see. It's
Yeah.
there. It's like on a subconscious level, the trigger happens, but it's trying to bring something up before you, right? So
Yeah.
I love how you described the process that you took yourself through, and also the concept of really accepting all parts of ourselves,
Yeah.
right? Accepting that this is who I am and not judging it, not being angry about it,
Yeah.
not having resentment towards it, but just allowing it to be what it is. Because the moment that we see it for what it is, now we're putting a different lens on and we're able to have that compassion towards our own selves.
Yeah.
Right. So it's beautiful. I mean, that's something that I personally as a coach really walk people through doing in their lives. It really helps not only like with relationships with others, but the relationship with ourselves,
Hmm.
right? Because oftentimes what we're not able to accept about ourselves, it keeps showing up in our lives because it's showing us that part of us. I absolutely love everything that you shared. So I'm just interested now in knowing, so you had all these experiences, you went to this retreat, you were in this huge debt, about to go bankrupt.
Yeah.
So was that where sounds like you hit rock bottom. Is
Yeah, I
that
think that was my
accurate?
personal rock bottom. I mean, for
Right,
somebody else, it might be
right,
alcoholism or, like
right,
countless other things,
right,
but yeah, the fear of death, the fear of losing everything that I built to that point, the fear of being kind of both mom and dad to my kids. And
right.
am I doing it right? Yeah, that was
This is a
very
lot to
difficult.
bear. It was a
Yeah.
lot on
Yeah.
your shoulders, a lot to bear, a lot to process, a lot of
Yeah.
responsibility. I mean, that sounds like a pretty good thing to call rock bottom in
Yeah.
my opinion.
Yes.
So what was like you had this experience? Is that what just like flipped the switch to where you shifted things? What happened after that?
Well, I would love to say it happened that quickly, but I don't know if
Right,
anything ever happens that quickly. It
right,
kind of, you
right,
get two steps forward, one step back, two
right.
steps. So I told you I came back and I had all the same problems as before, but they felt a little bit lighter. I
The
started part,
auras didn't take care of the debt.
no, I wish. Yeah. And so honestly, I would say for the next 2 years, I practiced heart-centered meditation, which I learned in the retreat, and I paid attention to my dreams. And so I'll share, let's see. Well, I'll share two things that happened in that 2 year period of time. The first one was about a year after I had gone to the retreat and had been recording my dreams. At that point in my life, I had had 6 straight years of chronic neck pain. And man, I had tried everything. I had gone to the chiropractor, I'd gotten massage and physical therapy, I'd gone to ultrasound, acupuncture. I tried everything. I got books on neck pain and followed all the exercises faithfully. I got a bouncy ball and sat on it at work at my desk. I stood up at my desk. I tried getting up and moving, and man, nothing worked more than for a day or two. And mind you, I was athletic, so here I am in my early 40s with this chronic neck pain, and I was kind of adding that to my list of woes too. Like, I can't believe I have to live like this. Now, 6 years earlier, I had been rear-ended in a car crash, and it was a classic whiplash type injury. And I just assumed that's what it was. And I even went so far as to get, I had surgery where they put me under and gave me facet joint injections of cortisone in my neck. And when I woke up and the anesthetic wore off, my neck still hurt. And I was in such despair. I can't believe I'm gonna have to live like this. So I go to work. I come home early from work one day. The kids come home from school about 4 o'clock. So I got home at 3:30 and I lay down in bed in a fetal position in tears. And I said, excuse my French on your live program here. Why the fuck does my neck hurt so bad? And instantly I'm in a dream. This like it was almost like the dream was answering my question. And it was a monk pacing back and forth in a red robe and a shaved head out at the end of my driveway, right in front of my house. That was it, the whole dream. And somehow I knew the dream was trying to tell me that's why my neck hurt. But I just, again, learning to work with dreams, how the heck does that have anything to do with the pain in my neck? So I got on the dream form that I've been working with, and I explained the 6 years of neck pain. And then I came home and I complained about, asked the question, and the dream seemed to be answering my question. And the leader says, that dream has everything to do with why your neck hurts. I'm like, what? What are you talking about? You know? And he goes, well, look up a monk. What does a monk symbolize? Why do they shave their heads? Why do they wear red? Why is he pacing back and forth outside of your house instead of in your house? And so, and then over time, he said, I want you to open this idea. So we were talking earlier about different parts of self. You have a very spiritual side, a selfless monk side of you. And he wants to come in your house, but you're not letting him in. And again, you have to understand that I had been so rigidly rational for so long, that just seemed impossible. And in fact, my wife sometimes says my book should have been called Rigid Rational Male Transforms into Random Accidental Mystic. And so, well, and so that probably was a better title, but and he goes, you don't have to do anything, just open to this possibility. So a month goes by, I have another dream. And in this dream, the guy who's leading the dream form is walking towards me, and he's got his hand out like this. And he's reaching for my neck, and he's going to heal my neck. And in the dream, I'm like, oh my God, finally, somebody's here to heal my neck. Thank you. Now it kind of looked like he was going to do Reiki on my neck, right? But as soon as he goes to put his hand on my neck, I apologize, Fatí, here I go again. An angry old man who lives in my neck says, get the fuck away. And no healing. And so now I'm learning more, and it's slow. And with the dream form's help, it was like I start to realize almost everybody has some place or places in their body where they hold resistance. It can be their head, it can be their neck, their shoulders, their upper back, their lower stomach. Well, it turned out I was holding it in my neck. And I admit, at that stage in my life and what was going on, I was resisting a lot of things. And so now the new thing was, can you allow that spiritual side of yourself in? And can you start to let go of all the things you're resisting and are holding like this tight steel rod in your neck? And so honestly, Fatí, 2 more years goes by, and I'm trying to open to being a spiritual person. I'm trying to, let go of all the things I'm so resistant towards. And then comes the final culminating dream where that same monk who was pacing back and forth outside my house is suddenly standing right behind me, like in my office. And he's looking at me with such love, and his heart is pierced and open. And I suddenly realized my neck didn't hurt anymore. Wow. Like it just wasn't, I just was like, my neck doesn't hurt anymore. And so it's something I still have to be conscious of and aware of. And that when I find myself resisting something, don't resist it anymore. Don't let it pile up in my neck. And, and I think everybody, like I said, it can be all those body parts plus the stomach too. Sometimes people will carry resistance in their stomach. Right. And so that was a huge thing that, one of my favorite sayings is sometimes you don't know what you don't know.
Right. It sounds like what's coming up for me sounds like you keep saying I was trying to be the spiritual man. It sounds like you were actually on your spiritual path. You were paying attention. You were following the signs. Yeah. It's a path. It's a journey, right? I don't really believe that in any of these journeys there's an arrival. There's growth. Yeah. There's an evolution that we go through. Sounds like to me that you were on your way to become more spiritual already back then.
Yeah, but I think sometimes the ego or my identity is playing catch up. Like the greater part of me knows exactly what's going on, but my mind is still, I like football. I like to compete. Right. I don't want to be compassionate. I don't want to be spiritual.
Right. And, I oftentimes remind myself, and this makes it really easy for me to make this, this connection. I remind myself that my brain is a computer that's running programs. Yeah. And so when I feel resistance in my body, I go to my body and my heart to find the answer, right? Because it's a fight between the mind and what comes innately from inside of us, right? Which is held really more in the heart than it is in the mind, right? And so I always do this check-in now, because for a long time I found myself fighting against myself, right? fighting up, I get rebelling against my own thoughts and what my mind kept putting in front of it. And I still do. I still do. I wish that I could be immune to that, right? There's always a moment where I catch myself, though, and I remind myself, okay, what's my truth? What do I feel within my heart? But yeah, I think this back and forth with our minds is always going to be there, and was very helpful for me to really not identify my whole self with my mind.
Yeah.
Really see the mind as it's really the computer that's running things, and sometimes it just needs updating and needs new programs that serve me.
Oh, you nailed it. You've just described perfectly the most difficult part of the whole journey for me. Is I want to say my mind or my ego or my identity is always playing catch up. Right. And I think kind of the way you describe it, the brain is kind of wired that way. I think the brain is sort of wired for certainty. It's not wired for change. And if you're constantly changing, the brain's constantly rewiring, it can be kind of exhausting. And, but yeah, looking back, all the things I was afraid of were just fear of uncertainty and fear of change. But the change was coming anyway, whether I liked it or not.
Right. So when did the narrative start turning around in terms of your life now showing up differently?
Well, so I'm going to tell you one more story where things just got amped up to a whole new level. So a little over 2 years after that retreat. So mind you, so it was 2002 when my journey kind of began, the story I'm telling you. And so 2 more years goes by, maybe 2.5 years, and my company's starting to get a little better. And for the last 2 years, it has not lost any more money, but hasn't gained any more money. Okay. So I'm literally like one hair's breadth away from going bankrupt every single day. Wow. It was hysterical. I mean, robbing Peter to, it wasn't getting worse, but it wasn't getting better. But then 2.5 years later, things are starting to improve. And so I owned a large consumer products company, and we made cleaning products and pet products that at its time were kind of ahead of the curve. They were biodegradable and environmentally safe, and pet and people friendly, and they were sold in retail stores all across the U.S. And I had the opportunity to sell my products on QVC, the home shopping network, and the QVC folks said 700,000 new people are going to be seeing you every minute. Wow. And that's just people channel surfing. They stop and they listen for a minute, and so I was nervous. I'd never been on live TV before, so I go there, get on TV. I didn't screw up. I had my 7 minutes of fame. I sold a fair amount of product, not a lot, but not a little, kind of in between. And so I go back to my hotel room in Philadelphia, and for some reason I can't sleep, and I feel all this joy in my body, and I just assume it's because I didn't screw up on TV, and the relief of it's over now, and it wasn't that big a deal, and it all went okay. But my body's still on West Coast time, but I'm on the East Coast, but I have to get up at 5 a.m, and I just can't fall asleep. And so at midnight, I'm laying there just trying to fall asleep. And all of a sudden I have what feels like this giant orgasm in my perineum area. And talk about something I didn't know was possible. And this beautiful energy that goes upwards along my spine kind of permeates my whole body. And I'm like, what the hell was that? And a few minutes later, it happens again. And then again and again. And I'm in this sense of, I have no idea what's happening to me, and I'm terrified. At the same time, whatever it is feels so good, I'm not stopping it. Right. And so after 3 hours of this, I get up, I try to shake all the energy off because I feel like I've been drinking caffeine. I try to sleep, but I doubt if I even slept for more than an hour. And I hop in the plane, fly home, email a bunch of people who I thought were more spiritual than me, and said, what is going on with me? And they said, sounds like Kundalini rising. Look it up. Right. Yeah. And so I looked it up and went, I guess that does sound. And then it gave me peace because I bought a book and read some more stuff that, that while the journey can be kind of wild, it's considered to be a good thing. And that many different cultures have many different names for it, but it's all the same thing. And so then began my journey of every second or third night, what I would call the energy would come, and it would do all sorts of crazy things. And so talk about my brain trying to figure out who I am. And, it's one thing to be like a little monk who's walking in a robe outside the house. Another thing to be having just this powerful energy that was just it's hard to really describe the power of it. And so some have called Kundalini energy sexual energy, primal energy, feminine energy, earth energy. And it definitely felt like that to me. And my dreams were full of goddesses. I mean, night after night, every woman in every form imaginable, young, old, middle age, blonde, brunette, fiery women, earthy women, watery women. Oh my God, it was just crazy. And so, and without knowing it at the time, but now I can look back in retrospect, everything from learning compassion in that spiritual retreat, paying attention to my dreams, the Kundalini thing. At the same time, I was in a group therapy process where in the blink of an eye, all the men left and I was the only guy with a bunch of women. And so in so many ways, looking back, my journey was into all things that most people would call feminine. And most people, not all, but most people call Kundalini energy feminine energy. So I was getting it on all levels. And it was funny because my dreams were suddenly full of, I would see myself in my old job, which my original job, I was the store manager for a regional grocery chain. I managed a bunch of stores, and I would have dreams where I'd gone back to the store and I didn't know what to do anymore. And all the women were running the store now. And they're like, oh, it's okay, John, we're going to show you how we do things. And so that began a whole new phase of my life. And my biggest fear during that phase, which lasted for years, but was probably most intense for the first 6 months, was that I was going to be altered in some way, because I still owned a business. I still had employees and salespeople. I still had 2 kids that I was coaching their ball teams. And I was just certain I was going to be incapacitated in some way. Never happened. The fear was completely unfounded. The energy knew exactly how far to push me and when to push me. Sometimes they'd be up almost all night with the energy, and the next day I would struggle and be tired. And then thankfully the energy wouldn't come for a night or two. And then when I felt rested, here we go again. And so, I think that was the most difficult part of that journey. There were a lot of terrifying things and beautiful, beautiful things. It's a good thing I'm not afraid of snakes, because I had all sorts of dreams of cobras and serpents and
Wow.
yeah. And again, this was exciting and enthralling, but coming back to that sort of ego identity as sort of this rational male, that was a difficult journey for me.
Well, a rational male with a lot of mystical experiences.
Yeah, well, yeah.
Right? That's quite the,
Yeah.
I don't know many people that experience that on a regular. It sounds like for quite some time you had this Kundalini experience.
Right.
Right? Yeah. I actually had a few of them too, but not like for an extended period of time.
Yeah.
So I know exactly what you're talking about. And so how do you feel that this, then, it sounds like to me that that intention of that first retreat that you went to, of like having this mystical experience, it did actually manifest. It just manifested over time.
Yes.
In all these different ways, right?
Yep.
Again, it was brought to you in the way you needed it, not the way you expected it.
Yeah, that's exactly right. Yeah.
So,
go ahead.
Go ahead. No, go ahead.
Well, and I was going to say, I wouldn't, on some level, I have a comfort level with that sort of, I don't like the word rigid, but kind of a sense of what I would call masculine structure and logic. Right. And I think it's good that it took me on the journey slowly. And it did appear to be in this lifetime, you might say, my journey was to do it as a single dad, and not to be off in the monastery or up in the woods or in the cave somewhere while this was happening. Because traditionally, a lot of these things have happened to people, all cultures all throughout time. And most cultures know to give this person a period of time to kind of go through what they're going through and then kind of re-enter into the real world. But in my situation, it was like, I was given a little bit at a time and kind of expected to remain in the world. Does that make sense?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
I mean, you still had to care for 2 children and business and reality.
Yeah.
Not everyone can just go and like meditate all day long for like 3 years, right? To have that, spiritual transformation or whatever you want to call it. I love that you pointed to that. And so did this, how did this then like start affecting your everyday life?
Well, again, you know, when I look back, I felt totally supported the whole way, but I didn't even know support was a thing. I didn't even know it was
Right.
possible. During that period of time, I had walked into a bookstore and was buying a couple of books by a spiritual teacher. And the lady ringing him up says, um, would, you know, oh, well, these are really good books. Would you like the author to sign them? I'm like, what? Is he here? And at that moment, I turn around and this guy is coming out of a room with a crowd of people. And apparently he'd been doing a talk there. And
Wow.
she's like, David, come on over. And so I found out David Spangler was his name. And he was a very popular spiritual teacher in the 70s, 80s, and 90s. And one of the first, you might say, founders of what they called the New Age movement. And I found out he lived 20 minutes from me and I had no idea. I mean, what are the chances? And so he comes over and I'm buying a book that he wrote called Parent as Mystic, Mystic as Parent. And it was like, what's it like to be a parent who's a mystic? And I find out, you know, that David wrote this book and he's a mystic and he's got 4 kids.
Wow.
And I felt so much comfort in his presence. He's like, oh yeah, you can do both. He goes, being a mystic will enhance your parenting, you know, it won't detract from it. And I just felt so much like, oh, thank you, thank you. And oh, there was something else I was going to say too. So, um, I think what was hard for a while was while I was going through everything, I didn't have anybody that lived near me that I could talk to about what I was going through in person. But I did find people online and we would communicate periodically by phone and email. But I mean, it was kind of surreal. There were times so my kids would get off the school bus at 4 o'clock. And sometimes if I could, I'd try and be home before they come home and I would try and take a little cat nap. And like, I'll tell you a couple of, I mean, these are true stories. So this one time I run and I lay down just to try and take a little, you know, 5 or 10 minute cat nap. And like an instant, you know, there's a goddess, this beautiful, sexy goddess. And she's got her arms wrapped all around me and she's got long, slender fingers. And there's like a radio dial on my chest and she's trying to adjust the dial. You know, like in the old days, you had a radio and you're trying to get a really faint station. And when she would get it just right, oh my God, my whole body would erupt in bliss. And then it would like, she's lose the station. And we kept playing the game of find the station, feel bliss, lose the station. And then the doorbell rings and my kids are home. And then like the next day, it's just like, oh my God, you know, and then like the next day, same thing, come home, take a little nap. And now there's this beautiful, powerful goddess, but she's sitting on me and I'm paralyzed and she's blowing a wind up through my perineum area, out through my whole body, like just trying to clean my body out. And I could feel this powerful wind blowing through and I could see the hair on my arms flapping, like it was exiting all the pores of my body. So, yeah, I'm sure on some level she was trying to clean me out. And then ding dong, hi daddy, we're home, you know. And so anyway, and it was just so that was the most difficult thing. It's like knowing what to say, what not to say, when to share the journey, when not to share the journey, wanting desperately to tell people what I was going through and wanting desperately to find other people that were going through it. So I didn't feel like I was all alone. Even though it was really cool, it was still very disconcerting too.
Right. And then that was a while ago. So people, we were not as connected as we are today with social media and all the communities that are forming around interests like this or experiences like this.
Yeah. Books gave me a lot of comfort. I can't believe how many times I would have a series of experiences and then try and find a book that maybe somebody had gone through it and I'd read it and like, oh God, good. I'm not the only one, you know?
Right.
And so I would say during that time, books gave me a lot of comfort. I mean, everybody's journey is unique, even though mine had a lot of crazy visions and a lot of wild energy. But a lot of people have gone through journeys like that with crazy energy.
Right.
They might be different from mine, but it just gave me peace that there was some sort of divine intelligence behind it all. And the more I started to trust that, the more I started to live my sort of normal life, but still go for the ride of what was going on at the same time.
Right.
Yeah.
So let me ask you something now.
Yeah.
So you went through all of these experiences. You had this spiritual evolution, awakening over years. And there was this desire of community around it. Sounds like through your dreams, you found a way, you found guidance, right?
Yeah.
To navigate your life and all these experiences. How is this now affecting your life today? Like what are you, where did it lead you today? What is the
Yeah.
work that you do now?
I wrote a book. We're talking about some of the
Right?
stories we've shared today in my book, The Synchronicity of Love. I wrote that early or middle part of last year. And I am teaching and hosting groups, holding space for people. I do one-on-ones with other people. It's been kind of interesting with COVID the last few years because I haven't really done a lot of online kind of teaching, but I used to do a lot of in-person teaching,
Right.
and just started that again this year. We talked about it briefly off the air that I had started it last year, but at least in the Seattle area, people were reluctant to gather together in person this time last year. So that's where I'm at right now. And I think if I were to say, like, probably what drives everything, I mean, the spiritual experiences are so fun and the cool dreams are so cool and the energy is really cool. But underlying everything is just trying to help people with compassion, love, and forgiveness. Compassion, love, and forgiveness. And I taught a class last week that we focused a lot on self-love and especially body love and the importance of taking care of the body on the spiritual journey and how sometimes the body can be forgotten. And we worked a lot with that. And my experience is the more you hang out in the heart center with love and bring it to your entire beingness, including your physical body. I have other stories I could tell another time, but where I want to say the body talks to me and tells me, hey,
Right.
this is what's going on. I need some help here, or you need to change your
Right.
diet, or try this. I'll tell a short one really quick. I have a body that runs hot naturally anyway. I'm kind of one of those guys that's usually in shorts and a t-shirt in winter. And 1 year in Seattle, we'd had an unusually hot summer. My house is a big rambler and it's got a lot of glass. So it's like a giant greenhouse when it gets hot outside. And so I was miserable. I'm walking around the house just moping. Oh, I'm so hot. It's so miserable here. And 99% of the homes in Seattle don't have air conditioning. So, but anyway, I fell asleep and had this dream that said to take turmeric. And I'm like, turmeric, that orange Indian spice? And I looked it up online. It says nature's anti-inflammatory.
Wow.
And so I had no idea. And so, yeah, I think that's probably underpinning everything I do is compassion for yourself, compassion for others, and try and get people in touch with what I would just loosely call divine guidance or their higher self-wisdom.
Right. There's one thing that I want to emphasize on what you said, right? Because I find this to be a challenge for someone who's like spiritually so connected and really into that kind of work, inner work. There's a tendency to forget all the other parts of ourselves, right?
Yeah.
So body, this physical experience, right? And sometimes that can also become a bypass, right?
Yeah.
We deal with everything up there, we just go to the spiritual anytime a challenge that arises that's in this physical reality. And I love that you pointed to the need to, that taking care of our bodies is a part of that.
Yeah.
Taking care of our mind is a part of that. Every time that we deny a part of ourselves because we just go to the thing that gives us the most relief or the thing that is easier for us to grab onto, we're denying a part of ourselves. We're layered beings. We're not just spirit. We're here in this body for a reason. There's an experience that we're here to have. And so really having this experience in a holistic way, to me, is the true essence of what we're here for.
I totally agree. And thank you for bringing that up. Many people, including me, believe that Mother Earth, is going through an ascension process, and all the beings, all of life on Earth is going to be living at a new vibrating rate, a new dimension. And I can't tell if that's going to happen tomorrow or centuries from now. I don't really know, but it's happening. And having, it's one of the things I wrote about in my book and kind of concluded at the end is the body is going through an unbelievable change too. And anybody that's kind of familiar with this ascension process will tell you the body is going through ascension symptoms, and the body is, I don't know, Fatí, if you've experienced, some days you wake up and you're like, what the hell is going on? Your body just feels really tired for no reason, or really agitated for no reason. And so I don't think there's ever been a more important time on earth to bring love to the body, like you said, the mind too, and care for it and really listen to it. And because, one of my favorite books, Michael Singer's book, The Surrender Experiment, he kind of went through what you're talking about. And the one gripe I have about the book was when he kind of awakened to it, I'm just going to call his true self. And for him, it became abundantly clear that he wasn't the body and he wasn't his thoughts. And so he spent quite a long time doing yoga and meditating and time alone and trying to just stay in that infinite, beautiful peace. But it was like he took what he called Mickey, like his body, his personality, ego, and shoved it aside. And then one day he had this dream. I was like, you can't continue down this path. And he suddenly realized, oh my God, I have to bring the body, the personality with me. And then he said, even in the Bhagavad Gita, it says we raise the self, which I'm going to call the body and the personality, with the self, like capital S. Right. And so I think it's bringing those two together that's really important, not one or the other, but bringing, how can I bring this infinite love and wisdom to my body, to my personality, so that we as human beings can grow too. And I think some people have called that, waking up is kind of what happened to Michael Singer. Growing up is bringing the body and the personality along with that higher wisdom.
Absolutely.
Does that make sense?
Absolutely. It makes total sense. It is about not letting any one part run the whole show, because we are all of this, right? If you are not taking care of your body and you're this highly spiritual person, the body's going to speak to you and like, is going to like get your attention somehow. Right.
Yeah.
And I truly believe that having a healthy body, healthy mind, being spiritually healthy, emotionally healthy, is all part of that health, that bliss that we're looking to have, right? Because it could be highly spiritual and then have a lot of issues, frankly, like illnesses, and that's not a happy place to be in for as long as we are, I don't want to say trapped, but we are living this experience through our bodies. To have that body function in a way that feels good is just as important, in my opinion.
Yeah, I'm with you.
Something, right? If anything, that may even be the learning, right? Is, are you going to be able to maintain that highly spiritual point of view while living through your body, right? Or being in your body?
I have a friend that's a sound healer, world famous, Tom Kenyon. He lives up on Orcas Island, a little bit north of here. And he would do 2 or 3 big events a year, and hundreds of people come from all over the world. And he has a nearly 4-octave voice, and all of these beings would sing through him. And that was kind of what he would do. But he, for 20 years, worked with a group of beings called the Hathors, who are an ascended civilization that lives on Venus, and they live between, I think, the 4th and the 12th dimension. And they're here helping humanity with this ascension process. And they just said, for mankind right now, take care of your body, practice love, practice forgiveness. There may be 50,000 an infinite number of spiritual practices. And it was just saying the best thing for your evolution is the body, love, and forgiveness. It's pretty simple.
Pretty simple, right? And sometimes we just want to complicate it. We just want to find, because we want to find that answer that, frankly, perhaps we're not meant to find, or just know for certain in this experience, right? We're always looking for certainty. We're always looking to control life through that. And very much about, can you just be in your heart? Can you take care of your body? And can you forgive? Can you see the other side? I love it. This has been an incredible conversation. Before we end, I just want to ask you, is there anything else that you want to share with our audience? Anything that I didn't ask you that you would like to speak to?
Yeah, thanks for asking. I think the thing I would share as a former, but probably still part-time rigid rational male. I think sometimes, if you have really strong views on things, strong personality, strong beliefs, I just want to say to you out there, that's really cool, but it's okay to kind of open your heart and open your mind to other possibilities as well. I sometimes like to use the analogy. I think sometimes in life we build a brick wall around ourselves, and 4 brick walls, and that's kind of our certainty. And I think that sometime later in life, it's okay to start taking those walls apart brick by brick and let something new in. And so I think that's probably one of my passionate things is, okay, I used to do it this way, but I don't have to do it that way anymore. I can do it a new way, and having the courage to go down that new path. Because I think that brings an enlivening aspect to life instead of always doing the same thing in the same way and seeing things the same way all the time. To me, it's almost like a little secret fountain of youth. And and having the courage to do that, because it does take courage to allow yourself to grow and change or perceive things differently.
Absolutely. We love to stay in that comfort zone.
Yeah.
Even when it's detrimental to us, right?
Yeah.
Even when it's detrimental to us.
Yeah.
So I love this message that you're leaving us with. Just experiment with something new, see what happens, right?
Yeah.
Because you already know what you get from where you're at and doing things the same exact way you've done them always, right?
Yeah.
And trying something new may bring something very different that might even be exciting. So why not? I love that.
I also want to say thank you for rocking and being such a great solo host today, Fatí.
Oh, thank you. Thank you. We miss Rick so much.
Yeah.
But yes, we made the best of it. You were incredible, so didn't really need much help. I loved everything that you shared. There's so much resonance, as we were discussing before we came on, a lot of similar experiences. So I really connect with your story. I know what it takes to go through and overcome a lot of it. We sat here and like talked about it over the course of an hour, but we were talking about years and years of resistance and enduring and persistence and resilience and strength that you built, and a lot of fate. Yeah. And so I want to acknowledge you for that, because as someone who has been through a lot of that, who is currently going through a lot of that, it's not a linear path. It takes a lot of reminding yourself. It takes a lot of acceptance. It takes a lot of courage, like you were saying, and a lot of faith. So I have so much respect for someone like you who's gone through this path, who's sitting here smiling and sharing these stories with others, because it very much is when we make that shift into realizing that all of those things came before us, not only to teach us a lesson, but now so that we can put it out there for others. We can share it with others so that they can see hope. They can find solace in that. They can find community. They can, like you were describing, reading books gave you a lot of comfort.
Yeah.
Right? And I really, really, really respect anyone who has made it their mission to just go out there and share what their experience has been. So thank you so much. Yeah. I'm going to put in the chat how our audience can get in touch with you. All of your links, your website, is there, whatever links you gave me is there. So get in touch with John, get his book. I mean, we got a really good, we got a lot of snippets of it, but I am actually going to go get it myself because I'm so interested in all these amazing stories that you shared. And give us your feedback, get in touch with him. The episode is going to drop on podcast in a couple of days. Subscribe, review. Just follow us and help us amplify our impact. All right, everyone. Thank you again, John, for coming on. Sending so much love to Rick, too. We missed you today. We hope that everything goes well. And we will see you next week. Bye, everyone. Now I got to figure out how to end the broadcast, because usually it's not what I do, but end the broadcast.